but Jack Gorey with me. And Jack, we started the show off, and you're probably expecting the sandwich question, right? But there is no sandwich question this week. The question of the week changes every week. Jack's an author, everybody, just so you know. Do you believe in ghosts? Is the question of the week.
That's an interesting question because I'm sort of agnostic of ghosts. I've had some experiences. I had a close friend who passed away from drug abuse, and I've had some experiences since where I've had dreams and stuff and things where I felt like he was definitely there. So I don't know that I fully believe in ghosts, but I'm not going to rule it out either.
That makes sense. So you're an author.
Yeah.
You've got 2 books from what I was reading.
Yes.
Your 2 books are Reinventing Hannah and Mama's Illness. Now,
yes,
when it comes to writing, authors are all different in their approaches. Do you start with an end in mind when you write a book, or are you one of the authors that just lets the flow out of them?
Yeah, I'm definitely what's called a pantser, which means that I'm like going by the seat of my pants. Because I will very often start off with an idea, and I might have a direction that I'm going in, but it usually changes. And sometimes I even don't fully know what's going to happen in the scene. Like I might sit down to write a scene and be like, in this scene, these 2 characters are going to argue, and then as I'm writing the scene, the characters are like, nope, we're going to be best friends. or something. And so like I like to have a little bit of an outline, but it's a very flexible outline. So I might sit down to write and have a bullet point of, in this chapter, A, B, and C is going to happen, and then start writing, and we'll see if it looks anything like that.
That's awesome. I like that. A lot of people are very regimented in their writing, right? They have a very specific structure that they follow, and it's good to know that you kind of fly by the seat of your pants, as you said. Your books, when you're writing, do you try to get a message across throughout them, or is it just writing for fun?
It's both. I'm definitely very social justice-y oriented. And I do, before I complete this answer, I do just want to take a second to acknowledge what's been happening with the racial tensions and the racism that we're seeing in our country right now. Is I want to give a shout out to those people and honor them and let them know that I see and appreciate their struggle, and that I've been working on trying to figure out the best way to support people of color while also continuing with my own writing and my own messaging. So I want to say that first. And then as far as the books that I write, I don't sit down and say, okay, today I'm going to write a story about this issue, but I will, as I'm writing, because I always start with the character, issues will come in. So with Hannah, I knew that I wanted to write a story about a girl who was overcoming sexual assault. And I didn't really set out into thinking, okay, these are the points that I definitely want to make, because then it can get kind of robotic, right? You can kind of be like, okay, I'm going to make the character do this so that I can make this point, which isn't good. But as I was writing, and I realized that my character, Hannah, was going to go from being silent to being a survivor and to actually advocating for other people, that was the message that I wanted to send. And I always had the general idea of empowerment. That's what everything that I do is about, empowering, especially young people. My slogan is empowering young people through stories to live life on their own terms. So I try to write about young adults, teenagers and young adults who are overcoming tough stuff in their life, and show that it's not easy, but that it's possible to overcome.
We all have those times in our lives. When we look at the human journey, not the hero's journey, but the human journey, where we're growing up, from birth till 7, whoever our parental unit, whether it's a parent or guardian, is usually our safe space, right? We hit that about 7 or 8 years old, and we start to realize there's a bigger world out there. And as we do that, we start to rebel against those parents and start to actually find out who we actually are. When you look at that, does that, well, it obviously does by looking at what you've written. Can people who read your books use them as not necessarily a therapy, but a way to get through certain things that happen in their lives? Does it help people do that?
I think that's a great question, and I certainly hope that it does. I've gotten some reviews that show that does. I've had a couple of reviews, like a Goodreads, somebody said this took me a month to read because I'm a survivor, but it was really worth it and it really helped me. So those are the kinds of things that make me feel like I'm doing what I'm meant to be doing. So to me, that's like worth its weight in gold. And it's kind of a mixed bag kind of thing, though, because of the sensitive topics, for some people, it can be too much also. Like I've had, and that's why I have in the very beginning of the book, I have an author's note where I let people know this book is dealing with these topics, and I have some hotlines that people can call, like the domestic abuse hotline, the rape hotline, that kind of thing, in case they're dealing with, in case it brings stuff up that, because, you know, I want to empower people, but I don't want anyone to feel worse for reading. And that can happen too, because there's some people it's too close or it's too raw.
Allison says that your books really handle the issue really delicately and with a lot of respect. And
awesome.
That's awesome. I can see Allison's comments over here on my side, by the way. So I talk to a lot of people. My wife actually works with abused women. That's her job in a shelter. And sometimes what it comes down to, after the trauma's over, after a person starts to get over things, people have a hard time adjusting to life again and being their authentic self, right? And they hold it in, they think it's their fault when it really wasn't. And until you realize it's not your fault, you're not going to be able to get over it and forgive not only the other not forgive the other person, but realize it's their fault and forgive yourself for getting in the situation. How do you help people live their authentic lives through your books? I know it's a weird question, but it's a valid one.
Yeah, it's definitely a valid one. And I think just by showing the transformation, because Hannah definitely, like in this book, Hannah definitely goes through that whole process. And one of the things I try to show is that that's never that you really get over it, but you get to a point where with the proper help and with the proper support and with figuring things out, you can get to a point where you can put the pieces back together. And that's one of the themes of the book, you know. And with Hannah, I tried to show it as deeply and as authentically as I could. And she goes through a whole journey from at the beginning not wanting anyone to know, not wanting her parents to know, even though her parents think she was drinking and that's what's wrong with her and that they punish her and she's grounded, but she's more willing to take the punishment than to tell them what happened. So she goes from that to beginning to tell people, to starting to date again and meeting a guy and wondering, do I want to risk this? Do I think this is a good idea, or could he hurt me again? And all those aspects of her life. And she also ends up becoming an advocate for people who are sexual assault survivors. I don't want to go away too much about how that happens because I want people to read the book. But she shows that she takes that whole journey, and so I think that people can identify with her journey and say, "This is like me." And if she can do it, I can do it. But it's definitely a tough thing because, again, I also want to emphasize this is her story. And I've written her story as authentically to her character and to the issue as I can. But every story is different. So somebody else might read it and say, this isn't how it was for me. And I don't relate to this. And that's okay, too.
Now, a lot of people would look at you as who you are. And they would say, what does this person have any idea about this struggle, just from your outward appearance, right?
Right.
Can you tell us about your story and who you are?
Sure.
If it's too deep, you can tell me to go to hell. I'm okay with that. But just who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, definitely. No, definitely not too deep. I'm pretty open about the fact that I'm transgender, which means that I was born what's called assigned female at birth, which basically means I was born with a female body and all that. And I happen to identify as male, which is not something that I really came to terms with until I was an adult. When I was growing up, there was no real language around this because, in the 80s and 90s, it wasn't as prevalent as it is today, where people can say, hey, my 5-year-old is saying they're a boy or they're a girl, and go to the doctor and talk to them and find out what's going on. Back then, it wasn't talked about, and I didn't even know there was any such thing. So I grew up looking in the mirror and being like, everyone says I'm a girl, and the adults must know, right? Because they're the adults. So what's wrong with me that I don't know? So that was part of that issue also. And being raised and socialized as a girl throughout my childhood and young adulthood meant that I experienced life the way that a cisgender woman would at that time, because it was, I was presumed to be female. So there were incidents that happened, like guys coming up behind me at my locker and touching my chest, and without me wanting them to, and then saying, oh no, that was an accident, that the teachers would believe them because you accidentally put your hand on somebody. That kind of thing happened. And the other thing I do want to emphasize too is that even though unfortunately the statistics are more, or that I think something 1 out of 5 women will be raped or sexually assaulted, unfortunately it also does happen to non-females.
The stats are actually 1 out of 3 before the age of 10 will be sexually assaulted, which is by a close. The only reason I know this is because my wife's in the field, but 1 out of 3 sexually assaulted before the age of 10, and that's for girls, and 1 out of 4 or 5 for boys, which is there's a lot of freaking perverts out there.
There really are.
You were also, from reading your bio, it says that you were working on your master's classes in social work. Have you completed those?
Yes, I actually need to update my bio because I graduated in 2018.
Okay.
So I have my MSW from Columbia. And my background actually was working with Columbia. I worked mostly with criminal justice reform. So I worked in programs like cases where it was an alternative to bail program, where people who have been arrested for misdemeanor crime would come to our program instead of having to pay cash bail. And a lot of people had some issues like this in their background and other issues as well. I learned a lot. I learned a lot about the way racism and our justice system works, because the majority of people that I saw for tiny little stupid things, like they had a bag on a seat of the subway or something, were people of color. So that was something that I learned. And I also learned a lot about with sexual assault in particular, that one of the things I learned in some of my classes and some of my internships was that there is a pretty much 1-to-1 relationship between crack cocaine abuse and having some sort of history of sexual abuse, which is not something that a lot of people know. And which I think is important, because just arresting people and being like, you're doing this drug, you're going to get locked up, that doesn't solve anything.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah, so that's just something that's really important. And that's one of the sub-themes, is that Hannah's love interest, Brad, has in his history that he was arrested for smoking weed and for weed possession. Obviously, like in some places it's legal, in some places it's not at this point. And that's one of the big things that it's like, that can stick you with a criminal record that follows you forever for something stupid. And so I wanted to go into that as well, because Hannah's friends are basically like, you're the vice president of Students Against Destructive Decisions, which is a real organization, by the way. It's what used to be Students Against Drunk Drivers. And so she's very heavily involved with sobriety campaigns. And in their mind, this guy's a loser. He used to smoke weed. Why would you be with him? And so that was like something I wanted to address as well, is that like you can do something stupid, and she learns through her relationship with him that he was acting out his own pain because his parents had just gotten divorced, and he was not in a good place, and he was doing stuff that was destructive, like skipping class and just coming to school just to sit around smoking and that kind of thing. And so I wanted to make that clear, like the whole way that people judge other people for their stories is a problem, especially in high school where everyone judges everyone for everything.
That's exactly true. When you look at so I look for the deeper impact of everything that people talk about. But what you're talking about with the drug problem, specifically in America and in Canada, I'm a Canadian, and we've got full-blown healthcare up here. I pay a little bit more in taxes per year, but if I need mental health help, I can get it. If I need a specific drug plan, I can get it. If I have a trauma, I can see a counselor. Something like 40% of Americans don't have health insurance of any kind.
Right.
So do you think the problem stems from that, where people can't actually get the help that they need in the mental health specifically? Never mind the physical aspects of it, but the mental health?
Oh, yeah, definitely. I was a very, very big proponent during the primary season of Bernie Sanders because he was for Medicare for All, specifically mental health was included. And that's something that I'm extremely passionate about because too many people are not getting the mental health treatment. I've known people who have been struggling with suicide and PTSD and been like, I can't afford to see a therapist. The therapist I want to see is not covered by my insurance. And even if you have something like Medicaid, which is supposed to be a government-run insurance for people of low income in America, there's still in some places issues where it's like, if you sign up with the wrong Medicaid provider, this doctor might not take you. So it's like this whole big mess, and it should not be this hard to get mental health treatment. And I think a lot of issues stem from that. I also think that there is not enough respect given to mental health issues. And one of the reasons I write what I write is because what I see in the media, because I also write TV reviews for TV Fanatic. And a lot of what I see on TV is mental health is poo-pooed, or it's treated as if you have a mental health issue, you're going to be a violent person who hurts other people and that kind of thing. And that doesn't help anything. Sexual assault is also often glorified, or if not glorified, is either the person is shown getting over it very quickly or they're just permanently damaged without there being compassion in the story.
It's not a realistic depiction. And I think media, as your country right now is experiencing a group trauma like they haven't seen in 50 years. And I don't know if what's happening down there is going to be resolved. But after it's all over, people are going to need a lot of help to get past what's happening during the protests, to watching a man die live on tape because of a respected official doing something, right? When you look at that and the stories of your books and just the process of people getting through that stuff, do you think people are actually going to get through it, or do you think that this is going to spark something in your country? And right. I apologize for getting too political. And normally I don't get too political on the show, but you have a very unique perspective as a social worker, or at least as a master's of social work. Where does your country go from here?
That's such a difficult question because there's so much anger and so much pain for so many reasons. And I think between the racial issues that have been going on for a long, long time, like, to be clear, this did not just start with George Floyd's death.
No, so, it goes back to the founding, right?
So. Yeah. So, and, and I think in a lot of ways this country has been getting ready to be torn apart because the primary season, I felt like we were in this war between people who wanted a lot of change and a lot of people who were like, no, that's too much. We just want to get rid of what's going on, and the leadership that we have now, change the leader and everything will be fine. And so now I think the country could go in a lot of different directions, and a lot depends on what happens. I just saw today that the 4 police officers were all charged, which is a step in the right direction. But I also agree with some people who said that does not mean anything until we get some convictions, because we've been down this road before too. So I think people are very hungry for change, and that's part of what's happening. And I think that people are very determined to get that change one way or another, and I think that's important. But I also think that our country will not be the same, and it shouldn't be the same in some respects, because there's a lot of stuff going on that should never been happening. But I also definitely do not want to talk, for people of color, since I'm not one, and how it'll affect them. But I do think in general there are issues that race and class are kind of intertwined, right? Because a lot of the racial inequalities have led to a lot of class inequalities also, where there are people in this country who have very little, and there are people in this country who have a lot and don't seem to care about anyone except other people who have a lot. So I think that all of this is coming out to the open between this pandemic, which has been made worse by not having any kind of reasonable health care, and what's been going on with these police officers, and what's been going on for years and years and years with people of color, and also to an extent with the transgender and the rest of the LGBT community as well, because they've also had similar issues, which, not comparing, not saying they're the same, but they've definitely had their share of oppression also. That there's going to be some changes coming, I think. And I do think that our country will not be the same, and people won't be the same. And I think we can't really wait until it's all over to start addressing people's needs. I think there needs to be ways to address people's mental health right now. There needs to be some sort of way, even if it's just people supporting each other over Facebook or Zoom or programs like this. That's important too, because too many people are suffering and too many people are ready to explode, and it's kind of a scary time and a traumatic time for pretty much everybody in our country, to varying degrees.
From an outsider's perspective, I am Canadian, and from an outsider's perspective, I look at the other cultures, other Western cultures specifically. I look at the UK, I look at Germany and France and Italy and Spain, and you look at all of them, and they're not doing fantastic or anything like that. But generally, the people don't have that much unrest as what is seen in America right now, specifically over the racial divide. And the thing is, those countries are just as much of a melting pot as America is now. The UK has had people from everywhere come in the last, it's been 2,000 years where they've had people coming into their country. Yes, conquerors and everything else. Where do you, from a social worker's perspective, where do you see? I don't even know the proper way to ask the question. When we have a person from India come here, so a real actual Indian from India, right? When they come to Canada, generally they become part of the society, and it's in most other countries they do as well. There's a little bit of lag there, but their children for sure are integrated into the society, and from that point forward, they are Canadian citizens. When it almost seems like in the United States that there are literally two different citizenships, where one group of people is extremely elite and everybody else gets screwed over. And that's true for white people, black people, Asian people. It's true for everybody who's not part of that elite. Is the answer doing what they did back in the 40s and back in the 30s, where they broke up the monopolies? Is that the answer?
I mean, I think that's part of the answer. I don't think there's any one thing that we can say, take this one thing, fix this, everything's fixed. That's that's not going to work that way.
It's like a Band-Aid.
I do think that's part of the answer. I think that we need a lot of structural changes. And I think that part of it is breaking up these big businesses, which also, by the way, is very difficult for writers right now, because if you're an independent author like I am, you're not going to get sales if you don't use Amazon.
Yeah.
Because believe me, I've tried it. I tried initially putting Reinventing Hannah on every platform there was. Nobody bought from anywhere else.
Yep.
And to be in Kindle Unlimited, which is Amazon's special ebook program where people pay them a monthly fee to be able to basically read ebooks for free.
Yeah.
You have to only be on Amazon. They will not allow you to do that if you're on other platforms. So I had to take my ebook version. My paperback, I think, is still floating around like on Barnes and Noble and other places. But the ebook version could only be on Amazon. And in the middle of all that, people started saying, let's go on strike and protest Amazon because of the way they treat their workers during the pandemic. Yep. Everyone delete your Amazon account. And it was just kind of like, this was a very conflicted thing for me because I don't want to be like, I don't care about those workers because obviously I do, but I also don't want to be like, don't buy my book because it's on Amazon. So,
well, there's a way you could do it. You could, the other Jack Ory, have it everywhere else. That sounds bad. So as we come to a close here, I want you to promote your stuff. Where can people find you? I do apologize for going really political on this one, everybody. I hope you enjoyed it. The truth is we need to love each other. Where can people find your stuff?
Yeah, definitely. Well, first off, you go to my website, which is, I think on the bottom of the screen, jackaory.com. There's a section that says books, and you'll find information about my books there. You also, obviously, like I said, I am on Amazon. So you can search for my name on Amazon. You can search for Reinventing Hannah on Amazon. So it's definitely there. I have an Amazon page. I'm on Goodreads, so you can find my books on Goodreads. And if you've read it, please review, because reviewing helps people buy the book and helps me know if my book is landing the way I want it to land. So that's super important. I'm also on Twitter as Heroic Muse 2016, and I am on Facebook. My public page is Heroic Muse Books. And the reason that I'm choosing that imprint is I am preparing to eventually be able to publish other authors as well. But right now it's just me and my books because I'm not there yet. So, and if you want to see what Reinventing Hannah looks like, this is my dog-eared copy because it's the one that I use for all my readings. But I was lucky that I was able to barter for this front cover that an artist on Twitter who was starting out with book covers did for me, and I did some promotion for her. Her name is Lauren Wilmore, and then I did the back cover myself. So, but yeah, this is what the book looks like. The paperback version is pretty thick, but it's $12.99, and then the Kindle version is $3.99, or if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's $0 because you can download it for free.
That's awesome. You got your pitch down. That's fantastic. Yeah. I like that. So here's the thing I want to say. I want to say thank you for coming on and talking about issues that most people are afraid to talk about. When I say the answer is to love each other, I don't just mean that. The answer is also to try to understand each other. I'm never going to understand the plight of a Black person. I'm never going to understand the plight of a First Nation person. And God knows that I'm never going to understand the plight of a transgender person. It's just not who I am, so I can't understand it. But through my own journey, I can begin to understand a little bit of the sorrow, the pain that each other have had. And you'll never understand my journey if you didn't live my journey, right? So thank you for that. And I do honor you for being here. Before I let you go, the last question I always ask is, what's one thing you've done for yourself today to make yourself happy? And it can't be the interview.
Cool. Yeah, well, I worked on some fan fiction today, so that was a lot of fun. I enjoyed doing that. Kind of, I write Days of Our Lives fan fiction, so I started writing it as like an answer to things that I did not like about what was going on the show, and so I've been doing that for about 5 years, and I post it on a Days for Monday through Friday Days forum called My Hourglass, and that's always fun to write because it's like it's creative, but it's not work writing. So that was my fun thing for today.
Days of Our Lives fan fiction. You may have just lost every reader. So I'm just kidding. I want to thank you for being here, Jack. And I'll keep you on after the show for a second. I just need to wave bye-bye, and I'll hit the end broadcast button.